Title of my project is New Poetics. And unlike some of the other titles that we've seen today that are very illustrative and illuminating, New Poetics doesn't really give you much of an idea as to what I actually did. And I assure you that's not because I was too lazy to come up with a good title and I just thought of one at the last minute. It's really because I had trouble thinking of an appropriate way to frame it, and that was reflected in the title. I actually experimented with a couple more titles, tried to put a colon in there. I had an examination of understanding, how we build meaning, Ghosts in the Basement was a cool creative one. But none of these I really felt were very appropriate, and from there they just sort of broke down, and I was like, okay, no colon, we're just gonna have to stick with New Poetics as the title. And the more I thought about it, I realized that's not necessarily because I was just having a creative block. It was because a lot of the time we don't have the appropriate language to talk about poetry. If you ask someone about a poem, they'll say their poem is beautiful, a poem is meaningful, it's evocative, but when you sort of get down, you say, okay, why is that the case? What about this poem makes it that way? The rhetoric we have really starts to break down, and we're not really sure why that's the case. So with that in mind, I sort of started the project New Poetics to try to get at that question of how do we start to understand a poem? How does someone presented with something start to build that bridge of understanding and come to make meaning out of that? And my method for doing this was really, really simple. I started writing poetry, and I started soliciting the community to find anyone who would be willing to talk to me about poetry. And I sort of sat them down, gave them one of my original poems, and said, okay, just read this and react to it. And then I filmed the whole thing. Some people asked me to leave while they read it. Some people asked me to stick around. And some people talked extensively about it. Some people really had nothing to say. I also cataloged the written responses, people who would write on the poem when they had it. So some people would write very little, just enough to cross out a line that they didn't like, right there. And then other people would just write exhaustively, take half an hour to an hour just writing me extensive notes. And this actually goes onto the backside and is like a whole treatise on what this person thought, which is really, really interesting. So the best way for me to sort of give you an idea of what actually went on was probably to read you a poem and then show you a short compilation of the reactions to that poem, sort of giving you guys experience the project as the readers did. So this slide may not show up, but that's okay. I have the poem, so I will read it aloud. Excuse me. This is Formulae. You don't find me with my shoes untied, inexplicably. Asked if I remember the face of the white American, I rearm the taste of smoke in the old days. Those who man the spotlights cannot afford babysitters. Are you looking for your firstborn? I sent him down the river. And so this following clip is sort of just a really quick compilation of people who read this poem and their reactions to it. So here we go.
Formulae. You don't find me with my shoes untied, inexplicably. Asked if I remember the face of the white American, I rearm the taste of smoke in the old days. Those who man the spotlight cannot afford babysitters. Are you looking for your firstborn? I sent him down the river. This is an interesting poem.
There seems to be something racial, something temporal with like the old days. The opening line, you don't find me with my shoes untied inexplicably, feels, I don't know, it has this like a material classist thing that it feels that way to me.
This one's more difficult. Oh, if your shoes are untied, you might be more likely to trip over them, and you won't have a reason to you won't find yourself, if anyone sees you with your shoes untied, you might trip, but you do it with reason. It's not like you just happen to have your shoes untied. Like you made yourself vulnerable for some reason.
The middle verse about the white American seems to speak of transition. I mean, in the old days, something's past, something new is starting. Rearm the taste of smoke, is that gun smoke? Is that...
Sending a child down the river feels like something that happens in a fable or a fairy tale or something in the old days, which is sort of a connection that my mind drew there.
And I got it instantly that it was the firstborn the first time, but then the second time I read it out loud, I thought, no, that could be, like, are you looking for your firstborn? And then you send the person down the river.
So that was just a really short sort of sampling of some of the range of responses that I got. And on the whole, I was really not prepared for the variety of what people would say presented with these poems. And it was really, really illuminating for me and sort of a nice window to my own personal creativity, as well as sort of general poetic theory on the whole. So there are far too many people to thank associated with this project, because everyone who was interviewed and all my advisors. So I'd just like to thank everyone who helped me out with this. It could not have been done without you. Thank you very much.